Christopher Nolan made a movie about Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, released on July 21, 2023. The life of this physicist was full of variety and adventure. As a child, he had a keen interest in philosophy and mineralogy. Initially, Oppenheimer studied chemistry. He then turned to literature. He also learned Sanskrit language to study Bhagavad Gita. There was a clear impression of literature in his works and words. His greatest achievement was the creation of the atomic bomb. However, this physicist also regretted the impact of his creation. Oppenheimer is a film by Christopher Nolan, and Nolan-directed films mean a massive hit in the film industry. The reason why the discussion about this movie is more intense is the story of the man himself. It depicts the life of a man whose hands changed the course of World War II. Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist behind the atomic bomb. If anyone thinks that the movie is going to show all the boring activities of a scientist, then the viewer is surely going to be wrong. Because Oppenheimer was a very fit and agile man whose whole life was full of variety and adventure. Historian Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin spent 25 years writing his biography, American Prometheus: The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer. Based on this book, Oppenheimer was made by Inception director Nolan. Ancient Dust is presenting you a very special part of Oppenheimer's life. Let's start with the day of the atomic bomb test. An explosion brighter than the sun. July 16, 1945. Sitting in the bunker's control room, Robert Oppenheimer waited for the moment that would change the world. About 10 kilometers away from the bunker, the world's first atomic bomb test was underway in New Mexico's Jornada del Muerto desert. The test was codenamed Trinity. Oppenheimer's face was simultaneously tired and excited. He was always a slim man. But after 3 years as director of the Manhattan Engineer District's atomic bomb-making mission Project Y, his weight dropped to 52 kg. For someone who is 5 feet 10 inches tall, that is very short. He had only managed to sleep 4 hours the previous night. Oppenheimer was watched by a military officer as the countdown to the explosion began. The general said, Dr. Oppenheimer seemed to be getting more agitated in the last few seconds. He was not breathing. A huge explosion happened immediately. The brightness even eclipsed the sun. With a capacity of 21 kilotons of TNT, the explosion was the world's largest up to that time. The resulting shockwave was felt from a distance of 160 km. The desert shook with a loud roar. Mushroom-shaped clouds rolled up in the sky. Oppenheimer's face was relieved. Jeremy Bernstein, his colleague at the Manhattan Project, said Oppenheimer was a key figure in the development of the atomic bomb. He was the person who made this bomb a reality. During the bomb test, he recited a verse from the Hindu scripture Bhagavad Gita. The line was, "Now I am death, the destroyer of worlds." 2 weeks later, Oppenheimer was dismayed at the fate of the Japanese people due to his creation. This friend of his said Oppenheimer was very sorry at that time. Surprisingly, Oppenheimer went back to work one day after the Hiroshima bombing. He gave instructions on how to improve the atomic bomb so that it will not be damaged by rain or snow. Oppenheimer was such a confusing figure to evaluate. Authors and people close to him have spoken about this aspect of his character. The scientist was born in a German Jewish immigrant family. Oppenheimer was born in 1904 to one of the earliest German Jewish immigrants to the United States. His family became rich through trading in textile products. Despite growing up in such a wealthy family, Oppenheimer was described by his childhood friends as having a generous nature. Oppenheimer began studying philosophy in Greek and Latin at the age of 9. He had a special inclination towards mineralogy. He wrote letters to the New York Mineralogy Club about his discoveries. The club authorities also called him to give a speech as they assumed him an adult. Oppenheimer was far ahead of his peers. Bird and Sherwin said he was not interested in sports. He was also teased for not participating with his friends. Oppenheimer's mental problems were first diagnosed when he went to study chemistry at Harvard University. This situation continued even after he enrolled in postgraduate studies at Cambridge, England. Oppenheimer was weak in chemistry laboratory work. The teacher let him work there. Oppenheimer was very upset about working in the laboratory. He felt that nothing could be learned from there. His resentment grew to such an extent that in 1925, Oppenheimer left apples laced with toxic lab chemicals on his teacher's desk. The teacher didn't eat the apple, and Oppenheimer did this not to kill the teacher but mainly to scare him. He was then taken to a psychiatrist. Describing this period, Oppenheimer said that he even considered suicide during the Christmas holidays that year. However, even if psychologists failed, literature kept Oppenheimer alive on his journey. During this time, he entered the world of poetry and novels. Oppenheimer and atomic energy. At the beginning of 1926, Oppenheimer met the director of the Institute of Theoretical Physics at the University of Göttingen in Germany. The director discovered his talent. 1926 is considered to be the year Oppenheimer entered physics. In the following years, he completed his PhD and postdoctoral work in theoretical physics. Many who studied with Oppenheimer there later joined the Manhattan Project. After returning to the United States, Oppenheimer began his professional career in California. At the University of California, he worked closely with scientists researching cosmic rays and nuclear fission. But he was the only person who managed to master the whole thing. In the early 1930s, he became interested in Hindu mythology. He learned Sanskrit to read Bhagavad Gita, learning from Arjun's unwillingness to wage war against the elite in the Bhagavad Gita. Oppenheimer frees himself from the moral remorse created during Project Y. His realization was that it is not rational to remain inactive for fear of consequences. Jan Tatlock met him during this time. Oppenheimer fell in love with her, but Tatlock repeatedly rejected him. Jan Tatlock introduced him to the literary works of John Donne. Inspired by Donne's poetry, he codenamed the bomb test Trinity. In 1940, Oppenheimer married Project Y colleague Catherine Kitty. Catherine was tasked with researching the dangers of radiation. In 1939, Oppenheimer was concerned about the potential nuclear threat before politicians. Einstein later brought the matter to the attention of politicians. The response was slow, but word of the threat spread among scientists. Later, the US president took action. Oppenheimer was one of the scientists initially assigned to investigate the feasibility of developing the atomic bomb. In 1942, Oppenheimer designed the atomic bomb with the help of his team. Oppenheimer had multiple personality disorder or MPD. Oppenheimer's thinking changed after World War II. He described the atomic bomb as a weapon of aggression and terror. He also termed the manufacture of weapons as the work of the devil. Oppenheimer told President Truman, "I feel that my hands are stained with blood." Oppenheimer argued about the moral ambiguity involved in the development of the bomb. He then said, "As scientists, our job is to fulfill our responsibilities. It doesn't matter how it is being used. Politicians are responsible for someone's death." But later, his position changed. This physicist died in 1967. He spent the last 20 years of his life as director of Princeton University's Institute for Advanced Study. He worked with Einstein and other top physicists. This entire time, he spent simultaneously boasting of being able to build the atomic bomb and regretting the effects of his creation.